The first snow of the season fell softly over the empty playground behind St. Isidore's primary school. It was one of those neglected play areas that whispered forgotten memories. Peeling paint on the monkey bars, a lone swing creaking with the breeze, and an old slide that had grown dull and rusted. The school's bell tower loomed nearby, its shadow stretching like a skeletal hand across the frosted ground. The children of Class 6B shuffled out for recess, their faces bright with the promise of a break. Among them was Nika. She was small for her age, with a pale complexion and wide, dark eyes that always seemed to be watching. Nika wasn't popular. Her shyness and awkward demeanor had earned her more ridicule than friendship. Trailing behind her, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, was Andre, her only friend. Andre had a permanent slouch and a quiet intensity that made him seem older than 11. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when he did, his words were sharp enough to cut. Together, they were outcasts, bound by their mutual alienation.
"Do you think they'll notice if we skip recess again?"
Nika whispered, glancing nervously toward the other kids.
"No,
Andre replied without looking at her.
they're too busy being idiots."
Nika smiled faintly. She felt safe around Andre. There was something comforting about his indifference to the world. The pair wandered to the far end of the playground, where an old storage shed stood. The paint was flaking off its wooden boards, revealing splinters of gray beneath. It had been locked for years, but Andre had discovered a loose plank months ago, creating a secret hideout for the two of them. Inside the shed, the air was damp and smelled of mildew. Broken desks, old textbooks, and forgotten toys were piled haphazardly, like offerings to some forgotten god. Andre pulled out a small notebook from his backpack.
"I brought it,"
he said. Nika's eyes lit up.
"What is it today?"
"Something special,"
he said, flipping to a page. He read aloud, his voice low and steady, weaving a tale of vengeance and shadows, of a girl who lured her tormentors into the woods and made them disappear. As he read, Nika's expression changed. Her nervous smile gave way to something darker, something hungrier.
"Do you think..."
she started, her voice barely above a whisper.
"Do you think she was right to do it?"
Andre closed the notebook and looked at her. His dark eyes gleamed with an intensity that made her shiver.
"If they deserved it,"
he said simply. 2 days later, something happened during lunch. Nika had been sitting alone as usual, picking at her food. Across the cafeteria, a group of boys had been laughing loudly, their voices carrying over the din. Among them was Darwin, the ringleader whose cruel smile had haunted Nika's nightmares for years. She didn't see the moment it started, but suddenly she was on the ground, her tray overturned, food smeared across her clothes. The boys roared with laughter as Darwin stood over her, a satisfied grin on his face.
"What's wrong, Nix?"
He sneered.
"Cat got your tongue."
Her cheeks burned with shame and anger. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her vision blurred by tears. She didn't stop until she reached the shed. Andre found her there later, her face buried in her hands. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside her in the growing darkness.
"They'll never stop,"
she whispered eventually.
"They will,"
Andre said. His voice was calm, certain.
"How?"
He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was enough to make her heart race. The next day, Andre handed her a folded piece of paper.
"Tonight,"
he said. Nika unfolded the paper and read the instructions carefully. It was a plan, a detailed, meticulous plan. It involved luring Darwin and 2 of his friends to the playground after school. Andre had thought of everything: where they would stand, what they would say, how they would trap them. Her hands trembled as she read it.
Andre, we can't.
We can.
He interrupted.
They deserve it, Nika. You know they do.
She wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. The playground was deserted when Nika arrived that evening. The sun had set, and the world was bathed in an eerie twilight. She clutched her coat tightly, her breath visible in the icy air. Andre appeared moments later, carrying a small duffel bag.
Did you bring it?
He asked. Nika nodded and pulled a small stuffed bear from her backpack. Its fur was matted, and one of its button eyes was missing.
Good.
Andre said.
This will work.
They placed the bear on the ground near the swings, a silent invitation. Then they waited. It didn't take long for Darwin and his friends to show up. The boys had been intrigued by Nika's cryptic note, which promised a secret game in the playground.
What's this about?
Darwin called out, his voice dripping with mockery. Nika stepped forward, her hands trembling.
It's a game.
She stammered.
A treasure hunt.
The boys exchanged amused glances.
Treasure, huh?
Darwin said.
All right, we're listening.
Andre emerged from the shadows then, his presence startling the boys.
What's he doing here?
Darwin demanded.
He's helping.
Nika said.
You have to follow the clues.
She gestured toward the bear. Darwin rolled his eyes but picked it up.
What now?
Follow the path,
Andre said, his voice cold and emotionless. The boys reluctantly followed the trail Andre had laid out, twigs arranged in strange patterns, cryptic notes pinned to trees. As they moved deeper into the playground, the air seemed to grow colder, heavier. Nika's heart pounded as they reached the final clue, a rope swing dangling from an old oak tree.
What kind of game is this?
Darwin asked, his bravado faltering.
This
Andre said, stepping forward.
is the end.
The events that followed happened too quickly for Nika to fully process. Andre moved with a precision that was almost mechanical. He opened the duffel bag, revealing lengths of rope and a small hammer.
What the hell?
One of the boys said, but before he could react, Andre swung the hammer, hitting him square in the jaw. The boy crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Darwin and the other boy tried to run, but Andre was faster. He tackled Darwin, pinning him to the ground. Nika stood frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't how she had imagined it.
Help me!
Darwin screamed, his voice echoing through the playground. Andre looked at Nika then, his expression unreadable.
Do it.
He said. She hesitated, her hands shaking.
Do it.
He shouted. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She grabbed the rope and tied it around Darwin's wrists, her fingers fumbling with the knots. The last boy managed to escape, disappearing into the darkness. Andre didn't seem to care. When it was over, Darwin was bound and gagged, his eyes wide with terror.
What now?
Nika whispered. Andre smiled, a slow, unsettling smile.
Now we finish it.
He said. By the time the police found the playground, it was too late. Darwin's body hung from the old oak tree, swaying gently in the wind. His face was pale, his eyes staring blankly into the void. Nika and Andre were nowhere to be found. Weeks later, a teacher at St. Isidore's found a notebook in the shed. Inside were detailed plans for the murder, written in Andre's meticulous handwriting. On the last page, in Nika's shaky scrawl, were the words, "We're free now." The playground remained abandoned after that, a grim reminder of what had happened. The swing still creaked in the breeze, and the oak tree stood tall and silent, its branches reaching toward the sky like bony fingers. And sometimes, if you listened closely, you could hear the faint sound of laughter, soft, eerie, and impossibly distant. The laughter of children who would never grow up. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe. I will see you again next week.